let's see. I've read a lot of good books in the last 3 or 4 years. Um, and I mentioned on Substack that my favorite fashion book is out, being read by somebody else. I may never see it again. It's called Clothes, 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 Music, 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 Boys, Boys, Boys by Viv Albertine. She was a guitarist in the Slits, which you may never have heard of. I had never heard of. And they were around the time of the Sex Pistols. And she knew Vivian Westwood and hung out with that crowd, Malcolm McLaren. And she was just a very cool girl. And she wrote this wonderful memoir, probably in her early 40s or late 30s. And the relationship that she had, I think, was with one of the members of the Slits. Anyhow, I can't remember, was abusive. And, she really lost herself. So it was as much a book about how she developed her own style, how she became her own person, and eventually left, still not right, that abusive relationship. It was pretty darn difficult life that she had for years. She would participated in the, squatting in London, all of that. It was a great book. Kind of introduced me to a period of time that I was only on the periphery of knowing about, and I just loved it. She just had great style. And so that's my most favorite book. And so I recently read this, Miss Dior. And if you've been watching The New Look on TV, streaming, wherever we watch it, it's a book written about Catherine Dior, who was Christian Dior's sister. And she had nothing to do with his life in fashion, except that she grew the roses that he used in his perfume. He had the perfume made for her. And the most interesting, she was very supportive of him. And they, in fact, lived together with their own partners in Paris before and during World War II. She was a resistance fighter and was, I don't want to say arrested, she was taken into custody by the Nazis and sent to, is it Ravensbrück? Something like that. Prison camp, and was very fortunate to come out alive. And she, I don't think, ever returned to Paris except to visit, and mostly lived in the country and raised flowers and mostly roses. And in fact had a business raising roses that were used by florists and perfumers. So my next book is called The Thoughtful Dresser. And this is a nonfiction book written by Linda Grant. And she wrote another one called The Clothes on Their Back. I don't think it's as good. She apparently writes other fiction as well. But this was a book in which she talked about what clothing means to women and how they use clothing. It was excellent. The stories were just fabulous. Um, I think she wrote for the Times or one of those papers and lived in Paris for a while, lived in New York. Excellent. If you find it, buy it and read it. My next favorite book is Fabric by Victoria Finlay. It's Finlay. She also wrote a book called Color. I read this one. No, I read this one after I read. No, that's not right. I read this one first. I learned a lot reading this book. So she, Victoria Finlay, is a social anthropologist who loved fabric and color. And so she traveled many, many, many places to do the research for both of the books. And they're both very well written. I just felt like I was reading a novel when I was reading them. Another funny book. Oh, it's called Fashion is Spinach. It was written by a woman called Elizabeth Hawes, and she was a fashion designer in New York. She also worked in Paris. She's kind of hysterical. She's just kind of like anti-establishment, just had every intention of doing exactly what she wanted, which I totally related to. And although it was written, I think in, let's see if I can find it was copyrighted in 2015. When did she write it? 1938. So like a whole different period of time. I found out things I never knew in that book. And again, I read kind of like a novel. This is Bill Cunningham, and this is a book about how he was the person who took the fashion photos for the New York Times. He also worked for Detail magazine, taking all of their photographs. And Jesus, now I'm off the other way. He came to New York from like Cincinnati or someplace, and he took pictures mostly on Fifth Avenue of people wearing the expensive clothes that they bought. And he had a great column in the Sunday Times. And let's see, he started as a milliner. He was gay. I think he was an embarrassment to his family. And so he moved to New York. He was very successful as a milliner, but hats kind of went out of style. And so he lived there were apartments in Carnegie Hall. He lived there. He kept every photograph negative that he ever had. He documented everything. There's now a foundation. I think he could be described as an aesthete. He had very few, if any, real physical, sexual relationships with anybody. He was just so into what he did. And I also have a book of a lot of his photos. It's currently the book that's on our book stand. Some great photos, and it's short, really good. Let's see if I can. So then I've got some that I don't really have any big thoughts about. Oh, this one. I have no idea how you say the author's last name. It's Prevesky. Um, so it's called The Lost Art of Dress. And I actually, many years ago, read this shortly after it came out. It came out in 2014. And I read it on my Nook because I was doing physical therapy and it was so boring. I had to be able to do something else. It was for my ankle or for my heels. And so I could hold, hi, Iris, good to see you. I could hold my Nook while I was doing all these leg exercises. And I read the whole book and then went out and bought a hard copy because I hadn't been able to look at any of the photographs or drawings. So there's things like that. So this is about, let's say, fashion in the US from like the 30s to the 60s. I've got my door open. Let me close this, which is making my other door go in and out. And I put a bag in front of it, but it wasn't a really heavy bag. So then I've got a book called Butts, which I bought, and I was really dubious, but it was really well written. So here's Color by Victoria Finlay. I think I read this right before we went to Australia. So here is Butts, and it was really good. I learned so much about kind of the physiology of butts and all the emotional baggage. I have a page marked. Let's see. Oh, it was about how butts are basically fat storage for women because they couldn't eat enough to support growing a fetus and nursing. So I marked that because I thought, what else did I? Yeah, it was such a good book. And of course, we have what we think of as our view of butts right now, but it's changed over time and continues to change. I remember my hairdresser and I being horrified that one of her daughters was actually trying to make her butt bigger because of Kim Kardashian. I still, whenever I see her daughter, think, oh girl, you're going to regret that someday. But that's just me. Here's a book called To Die For by Alden Wicker, who is a woman and is a journalist, and I can't remember who paid her to do this research, but it was so good. I learned so much that I didn't know about dyes in the clothing business and how dangerous they are. So, and all the problems that they cause. Again, had really good stories. I think she wrote it for Harper's or something like that. And maybe it was Vogue. And so she told really great stories and made it very accessible. So those are kind of my fiction and nonfiction. I guess that's all fiction, all nonfiction. So I'm going to go over here. So I bought this a few years ago, just because I had to have it. And um, the details are just things that we don't see anymore. It's called vintage details. And I haven't even broken the spine on it yet. But I will look through books like this frequently to just get inspiration. I don't really copy things, but I'm always looking for how people did things. And so I find something like that really inspiring. And I have this one that I actually was in a mastermind group through Craft Industry Alliance with the gal who wrote this. And her name is Ellen Miller, W. Miller, because there are, as you might imagine, many Millers. So she actually did all of the research and then perfected the methodology for doing these designer techniques. And it's just incredible. Every time I look at it, it makes me want to sew again. So here is something for piping a curve. And I've done many of these things, but not any of the fancy surface embellishment. And as you may or may not know, I started at the sewing machine. So there's just lots of fun things, but I bought it because I liked her. And if you're interested in that sort of thing, look online because she was putting together some classes. So I want to tell you about great knitting books that I have, but I'm not a big fan. I have some books on fit, some of them knitting specific, but trust me, they're not very deep. This is a textbook that I bought, post being in school, but it's pattern making and design for stretch fabrics, and it's all cut and sew, but it's got some good information in it. I think Kate Adderley's How to Write a Pattern book is good. This is literally the only book that's available on how to do braiding. Here's a fun book if you ever find a used copy. It's really great. It gives you like how you do all the different sorts of shaping. It was written in the 80s, I think. So it's very dated. I can actually look. And I got this book. It got it as a used book. Yeah, it was 1984. It smelled like mildew, which is a smell I cannot bear, and so it had to live like in our basement until I could get rid of the smell. But now it lives in my office. Here's a book called Knit to Fit by, what's her name? Ida Riley Duncan. I do not agree with a lot of what she says. She's very opinionated. But I've kept the book, so maybe I like that she's opinionated. And then I've got the Fleece and Fiber source book, which was written by Deb Robson. And if you just want to know a lot of things about different wools, it's a great book. So Mitch and I support local bookstores in a big way. And I buy things for my nook, and like the book on breasts, which was excellent, I have it on my Nook, and I can, I forget what I've read. So, and I was too lazy to turn on my Nook to find out. So let's see, what do I have? Oh, I've got a couple of interesting books. Sorry, I should have done this beforehand, but that's just not me. So I went to vocational school in the early 80s at our local community college, which is like a mile from where we are. I guess this is the front cover of this book. It's Japanese. My pattern making teacher was Japanese, Japanese descent. She was a sensei, second generation. So, obviously I don't read Japanese, but I read numbers, and there are these funky drawings and some good schematics. And I learned so much pattern making from this book. So this one was collars and necklines. Yeah. And then this one was sleeves. Everything I know about sleeves comes from this book. Don't ask me why, just a few illustrations and pattern pieces, and it all came together for me. No idea what it says. That's what a page is. This is something else. But I've spent many hours poring over that one. And then I have these books called Pattern Magic by Tomoko Nakamichi. And again, Japanese. These have been translated into English. Look at that cool detail. So again, these are mostly inspiration because I don't really sew anymore. But if you've ever wondered how to do something like that, it's in here. So that was Pattern Magic. Then we got Pattern Magic 2. How about that? Yeah, so just complete inspiration and a little bit of education on how to get the shapes. So, they show you something and then show you what the pattern pieces look like. They give you some very few measurements, but enough that you can make these things. And then here's number 3. Okay. Isn't that cool? So this is probably way beyond my sewing abilities at this, or interest at this point. But like here it talks about using darts to open something up instead of pulling it in. Look at that. Oh. So the Japanese actually appreciate people spending time figuring clever things out. And then this one, the last one that I have, I don't know that there's any more, is for knits. And again, cut and sew. But isn't that a cute little thing on our half-size model? Some other. And this one has half-size patterns in it. which I'm sure, I don't think the others have patterns for a basic bodice. So it may be, let's look in this one. Let's just say that if there was one, I do not have it. But the problem with those basic slopers is they're made for an Asian body, and we are constructed somewhat differently. So those are very cool books. I try not to buy things like this anymore because my time here is limited, and I know I'm never going to actually make anything. Although I'm going to pad out one of my half-size dress forms this weekend, so I'm going to have to get out my sewing machine to make some tubes to hold the padding. It's a concept. I haven't actually tried it yet. But I used to have, so I had a tube that I could put on my dress form to pad out her waistline so it was more like mine. Somehow she lost that, and now I need new ones. So let's see, I have been working on a pattern that's going into the pattern tailor. After fighting with the pattern tailor, I feel like I'm kind of mastering it, but it's quite a process. And I paid Holly to create some SOPs, standard operating procedures for doing it. She, of course, heard things because she was getting paid that I didn't hear, which have saved, having read her documents, have saved me a little aggravation this time around. And at one point, as I was working on Berkshire's, I'd been working on it for weeks. I couldn't figure out why I wasn't getting the help question marks in the customization window. And, I do everything on paper. And so to get this one worksheet to print, I wasn't printing this last column, which just had some hyperlinks. Well, it turned out that's how you do it. You put the hyperlinks into the document, and that's a pain in the ass. But now I know how to do it. God, just totally missed that until I was looking at it on the screen, and somehow it got pushed over so I could see the hyperlinks. It's like, oh, that's how you do it. So there's been a lot of that sort of thing. But that's going pretty well. I'm actually just going to finish up. I won't do it. I probably won't get back to it until Monday to test out what I've done. I'm getting ready to go to H&H, and Mitch has hauled out this huge duffel bag on wheels, even better, that I had completely forgotten we owned. So it will fit my 2 banners that I'm taking, and so I need to start packing, and I need to figure out how to use the projector that I'm taking, and and then I've got a display that I'm doing about the pattern tailor, and that requires a lot of just window dressing type stuff. Yeah, I took a class on window dressing when I was in college, in design school. It was part of, I think it was an elective for my degree, and it was called fashion merchandising. And so that was part of the class, was creating display windows, which I found quite fun. And kind of uses all the flotsam and jetsam that I love. And so I'm kind of re-exercising that muscle, which I haven't used in forever. So my booth is small, thank God, and I get there on Tuesday evening or late afternoon, and I have to have it done by Tuesday evening, or I have to have it done at the beginning of the show. I may have to miss the keynote address on that on the first day, because I may have to do the finishing touches on my booth. But I figure if I have everything ready, it won't take too long to put it all up. And I've been doing my swatches. I just, from the H&H book that I unboxed, and I have finished wet blocking the last 4 and got totally sick of sock yarn. Like sock yarn, which I guess tells you a lot about what people knit. Yeah, more sock yarn. So I have been posting pictures on Substack every day, and I will continue to do that. And then after I get back from H&H, I will post the blocked photos with the unblocked photos so you can see the difference. And if I feel like it, I'll give you gauge numbers, but I have a feeling I'm not going to feel like it. Unless, of course, I get some yarn from somebody. So it's 4:52. I know myself, and if I do not put these books back right now, I will be tripping over them when I get back from H&H. And I don't want to do that. There goes that guy in his swim trunks and his hat. They probably aren't swim trunks, but that's what they look like. And that's it. My begonias have been planted. We got out to the nursery a little earlier this year. Mitch was impatient to get them, and he stuck a trip to our car got scraped, and we need to get it repainted, so we stopped at the body shop. And then we did our grocery shopping after the nursery and went to the butcher so that we wouldn't have to do anything tomorrow. But it meant it burned up a lot of my Thursday. So tonight we're going to see Bill Frisell, which is always a pleasure. And if we drive, I'll have a martini when we come home. If not, I'll have my martini tomorrow. And that's it. My week was not as productive as I would have liked because I had a colonoscopy on Monday and some resulting bad sleep. But I'm back and got, so many irons in the fire. It's unbelievable. I will see you next week. Have a great weekend. I hope the weather is marvelous where you are. It has really given me a boost to have, day upon day of sun, even though it looks like it may be clouding over. But I have plenty to do this weekend, so getting ready. And I'll see you next time. Bye.